The 5800X3D was a CPU that changed everything when AMD dropped it back in 2022. It was like a wake-up slap to the gaming world, screaming, hey, maybe we don't need to keep jamming in more cores or cranking up their frequencies to ridiculous levels. The real bottleneck for gaming? Memory bandwidth. And AMD? They turbocharged their way right past the problem. Now, I'm a car guy, so buckle up for an analogy here. Back in the day, if you wanted a fast sports car, you just made the engine bigger. More cylinders, more displacement, more heat, and a lot more headaches trying to manage all that firepower. Sure, it worked, but it was kind of like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. Then came the turbocharger. Smaller engines with fewer cylinders, suddenly cranking out absurd power while sipping fuel. Mercedes-AMG's lineup is a perfect example. Their monstrous V12s used to be the king of the hill, but now, their top-tier models run 4-cylinder engines with hybrid turbo tech that are just as fast, if not faster, and way more efficient. Now, this doesn't mean they sound as good as the old V12s, but that's a different topic for another day. The 5800X3D is AMD's turbocharged CPU. It's not about brute force, it's about using that massive 3D V-cache to supercharge memory performance. And the results speak for themselves. More output, less heat, better efficiency, and a gaming experience that feels like you just strapped a rocket to your rig. Now, while the 5800X3D will always be the OG that started it all, these days the 5700X3D is the real star of the show. It's basically the same chip with slightly lower clocks, and let's be real, that doesn't really matter much since the cache does all the heavy lifting anyway. Gaming performance, nearly identical. Price, way better. Plus, I've proven time and time again that you can drop one of these into pretty much any motherboard or RAM setup and it'll still crush it. So, 2.5 years later, the 5000X3D lineup is still king when it comes to bang for the buck gaming performance. The AM4 platform is still going strong today, 9 years after its release. Not just because the chips are affordable, but because they deliver top tier performance without needing a fancy motherboard or RAM or even manual tuning to hit their potential. It's proof that AMD's turbocharged design philosophy just works and is still leaving everything else in the dust. 5700X3D is without a doubt the best bang for the buck gaming CPU for Escape from Tarkov. Hands down, no contest. If you're rocking an older AM4 chip or any Intel CPU from 12th gen or earlier, this is your golden ticket to a massive performance boost without emptying your wallet. Here's why. You can snag a 5700X3D, an AM4 motherboard, and DDR4 RAM for less than $300. Yeah, you heard that right, less than $300. I even showed this exact setup in one of my earlier videos. Shameless plug, check it out if you haven't. In that one, I walked through an upgrade path from an i5-9400F and showed just how big of a leap in performance you can expect. Spoiler alert, it's huge. And if you're already on an AM4 platform, it gets even better. All you need to do is drop the CPU into your existing motherboard and keep your current RAM. It doesn't matter if your board is basic or fancy, this chip will max out its potential. Heck, you could even slap on an ancient AMD Rate Stealth cooler, the one that came free with processors 8 years ago, and still be fine. No extra cooling costs, no frills, just plug and play. Honestly, there's no better budget upgrade out there right now. Where else are you going to find a performance jump of this magnitude for such a small investment? The 5700X3D is a no-brainer for a lot of people. But here's the thing, while the 5700X3D reigns supreme as the budget king, AMD's X3D lineup hasn't stood still. Fast forward 2 generations and now we've got the 9800X3D. Or, well, kind of. It's technically available, but only in theory because, surprise, surprise, it's scalped to oblivion and impossible to find in stock, and secondary market prices are a joke right now. At its actual retail price of $479, the 9800X3D is still a relatively solid deal. It's the top tier gaming CPU, and as always with X3D chips, you don't need to spend a fortune on a motherboard or RAM to unlock its potential. But it does require a deeper dive into your wallet compared to the 5700X3D. So let's break it down. What are the real differences between these two chips, and how much more performance are you actually getting if you decide to upgrade? Let's get into it. For this comparison, I used high-performance builds to ensure there were no bottlenecks from other components, letting the CPUs shine. The 9800X3D is paired with an X670E Aorus Extreme motherboard and 64 gigs of SK Hynix A-Die DDR5 running at 6000 CL30 with tightened secondary timings. I've optimized the CPU with the -40 curve optimizer value and 2200 MHz F-clock. It's also got a +200 MHz boost clock override setting. The U-clock is running 1-to-1 with the M-clock for maximum efficiency. Graphics are powered by my trusty MSI Gaming Trio RTX 4090. Storage is handled by an Aorus 10K Gen 5 NVMe. The 5700X3D is paired with an X570 Aorus master motherboard and 64 gigs of DDR4 running at 3600 CL16 with a 1:1:1 ratio for the F clock, U clock, and M clock. I've applied a -25 curve optimizer value for additional tuning. For storage, I use a QN322 2TB NVMe drive, and for graphics, the same RTX 4090 was used to ensure consistency. These setups were designed to showcase the CPU's full potential with no compromises in other hardware. For in-game settings, I used my Pure 80 preset custom settings profile optimized for high-end systems. If you'd like to fine-tune your own settings, check out my optimization guide linked in the upper right-hand corner. To establish baseline performance, I started with labs offline with no AI, following a consistent route for accurate results that you can see on the screen here. Next, I tested the Streets of Tarkov, both offline with no AI and online in live servers. Here's the route I took. I started off in Klimov and ended up on Lexos. These are usually the two heaviest areas in terms of performance. For each scenario, I ran 3 tests per route at 1080, 1440, and 4K, taking the averages to ensure reliable comparisons. Now let's dive into the results. At 1080p, the 9800X3D shows a significant advantage over the 5700X3D across all metrics. The average FPS is 48.7% higher, delivering a smoother gaming experience. The 1% low performance also improves by 57.7%, reducing frame dips and enhancing consistency. Most notably, the 0.1% low shows a massive 177.7% improvement over the 5700X3D, indicating a significant reduction in stuttering and a more stable frame rate, especially during intense moments like gunfights. Moving up to 1440, both chips maintained pretty much the same numbers and the gaps remained about the same. About 50% more on the average and 1% lows on the 98, and then again around 178% improvement for the 98 on the 0.1%. At 4K, the performance difference between the 9800X3D and 5700X3D is much less pronounced. The average FPS difference is only 3%, with both chips providing nearly the same performance, and the 1% low difference is minimal at just 1.9%, meaning that stutter reduction is marginal at this resolution. The 0.1% low, however, still shows a noticeable 73.3% improvement in favor of the 9800X3D. This means it handles the most demanding frames better, but not by as much as at lower resolutions. So while the 98 does perform better in terms of maintaining stable low frames, the overall benefit at 4K is much less impactful compared to 1080 and 1440. Moving on to Streets Offline at 1080, the 9800X3D shows a substantial performance boost compared to the 5700X3D. Average FPS is 56.3% higher. The 1% low sees an even larger improvement with a 67.5 increase. Especially noteworthy is a 0.1% low, which has a 118.8% increase. Similar to the labs test at 1440, both chips perform nearly the same as in the 1080 test, and the gaps are pretty much the same as well. 55.4% more for the 98 on average FPS. The 1% low for the 98 is 61.7% higher. The 0.1% low is the difference here, whereas in 1080 there was a 118.8% difference. Here there's a 77.6% difference. Still a noticeable improvement. At 4K, we're seeing the performance difference narrow even further. The 9800X3D still outperforms the 57, but by a smaller margin than at lower resolutions. Average FPS is 30.1% more at 148 versus 113.7. The 1% low difference is 58% more at 119.1 versus 75.2, and the 0.1% low difference is 116%. So it got larger again in 4K. Not sure what that means, but that is quite a significant difference, indicating that the 98 is much better at handling extreme frame dips. Moving on to the critical online tests on Streets, at 1080, the 98 provides a noticeable improvement again over the 5700X3D. The average FPS is 50% higher. The 1% lows are just about 50% higher, and same with the 0.1% lows, just about 50% higher. In every category, it's about 50% higher. Following the same trends we've been seeing, both chips performed just about the same as they did in 1080. Even though this is online, we're seeing the same trend occur here. Average FPS for the 98 is 45% higher, very close to that 50% mark at 137 versus 94.5. 1% low is again 50% higher at 107.4 versus 71.4. And the 0.1 0.1% load difference this time is 63.7% higher. So it looks like in online play, the 9800X3D's 0.1% lows did have a significant increase. For those curious about power consumption and temperatures, both CPUs were impressively efficient and stayed cool under load. Both CPUs averaged around 53 degrees Celsius even under sustained use. In terms of power draw, the 9800X3D consumed about 62 watts on average thanks to its higher thermal capability and increased power cap. Meanwhile, the 5700X3D sipped just 53 watts on average. These are still remarkably low overall numbers, especially when compared to the power-hungry competition in the same performance class. So to recap everything, the 5700X3D remains the king of value, delivering the best performance upgrade for anyone on AM4 or Intel 12th Gen and below at a relatively low cost. Meanwhile, the 9800X3D showcases impressive advancements, representing a generational leap in performance. However, the hype has led to inflated prices, with scalpers taking advantage of the excitement around this chip. In a perfect world where retail prices were consistent, the 9800X3D would be a compelling choice over the 7800X3D. But in the current market, as of November 2024, here are my recommendations for your upgrade path. If you want to keep costs low but still want a high performing CPU, the 5700X3D is the way to go. For AM4 users, just drop it into your existing system and enjoy the gains. For Intel 12th Gen and below users, pair it with any AM4 board you can find. A520 or B550 work just fine, and 32 gigs of DDR4 and you won't regret it. If you're looking to jump to AM5, at retail pricing, the 7800X3D and 9800X3D are only $30 apart, but with the 9800X3D currently subject to scalper inflation, I can't recommend it unless you're willing to pay the premium. That said, the 7800X3D is still a monster of a CPU. If you can find it for under $400, I think it's an excellent choice for those upgrading now. It will hold its value for the foreseeable future, giving you the option to sell or upgrade later when 9800X3D prices do stabilize. Speaking of the 7800X3D, I recently compared it to the 9800X3D in detail. You can check out that video here. Ultimately, both the 5700X3D and 9800X3D are fantastic options depending on your needs and budget, but be sure to weigh current pricing carefully before making a move. Alright, that's all I got for this one. So what do you think? Are you team 5700X3D for its unbeatable value, or does the 9800X3D's next-gen performance have you tempted? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below and let me know which CPU you choose. If you have any questions about upgrading your system, you can leave them there as well. If you found this comparison useful, don't forget to subscribe for more hardware breakdowns and guides. We're inching closer and closer to our goal of 10,000 subs, just over 700 to go. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and don't forget to join the Pyurologie Discord, now over 1,000 members strong. It's full of knowledgeable and respectful folks, and I'm always down to have a chat as well. My username is Puri. Good luck on your raids, and I'll catch you in the next one.